Hello, everyone. It's Sean here, and I'm doing my own wrap up this month. I'm going to go over 7 books I finished, and then 1 book I'm in the midst of. The first book I finished in 2020 was The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. Honestly, for me, it had a like me personally reading it, it had kind of a rough start, but once I got into it, it's become one of my favorites. It tells the story of an escaped slave, and obviously there are slave catchers trying to bring her back. The thing that you'll see on the back of the book or in the synopsis about Underground Railroad is that in this version of American history, the Underground Railroad is a literal underground railroad. It is a train that takes escaped slaves to the north. A lot of emphasis is put on that on the synopsis. Like, wow, what an amazing idea. And it's kind of funny because that's not a great idea, but it's funny to me because she's only on the Underground Railroad a handful of times. It really doesn't play that big of a role. I almost feel like he could have told the same story without that element. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but it is kind of funny because for the most part it seems like this historical fiction novel, but then you have this other part of it where you're like, I wonder why he did that. All in all, it's just a beautiful book. There are many violent passages. I mean, this is not an uplifting book. I will say that's something might be a little bit of a turnoff for some people. It doesn't stray away from showing the horrors of slavery. I mean, it can get pretty brutal. It also isn't a book where everything is happy-go-lucky. Right, and the next book I have for you is All the Light We Cannot See. This was Elliot and I's buddy read book for this month, so we both read it. Actually, she's still finishing it up, so I don't know her thoughts, and that's the thing. So we're not allowed to talk about it. I finished this at the beginning of the month. I've been waiting patiently to talk about this book. I don't know if it's one of my favorite books. I feel like at the beginning I thought it would be one of my favorite books. Definitely still, I'd say 5 stars, if we're giving it stars. So this book is about a girl named Marie Lure. I still don't know if I can say that right. But she is blind, and she starts the story in the 1930s. She lives in France, and the story progresses over like 10 or 11 years, if I remember correctly. So we're getting into World War II and the German occupation of France. So things are not great for her. And then the other character that we follow, basically we just follow those two. There's a few other perspectives you get, but the main two are these two. So the other one is, his name's Werner. He is a German orphan, and he has an affinity for technology, specifically radios. So he ends up being a part of the military, specializing in radios, I guess, radio technology. He finds a way of locating other radio transmissions. So that's kind of his job. He finds enemies through this use of radios. It's a moving book, and I really liked it. And it's just the one thing for me is the end. It had a Lord of the Rings movie thing to it. If you're familiar with the third Lord of the Rings movie, The Return of the King, there's like 5 different endings to that movie. I remember being in the theater and watching what I thought was the end. I'm like, wow, what a great ending. And then it went to black, and then there's another scene. I was like, oh, okay, that's a good ending too. And then it went to black, and there's another scene. That's how I felt with All the Light We Cannot See. There's a moment where I think it should have ended, and I want it to be done. And then it kept going, and I wasn't a fan of that. It doesn't like make it everything else I read before worse, obviously. It's just a little pet peeve, but still, it's a good book. Third book I read was Lincoln in the Bardo by George Saunders. Now this is probably, by probably I mean it was the best book I read in January. It's gonna be a hard one to dethrone for the year. I've been doing this with my hands a lot, I feel like, today. This one is very interesting. So if you look on Goodreads, which we do, you'll see this one's like at a 3 point something. And the reason it's at a 3 point something, in my observation looking at 1-star reviews, is people don't like how the story is told. And I understand why, because the beginning of it is told, well, first I should tell you what it's about. This book is bizarre. I mean, it's about Willie Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln's son, 10-year-old son, who died. And in this book, Willie Lincoln's ghost is just at this graveyard, and he talks to these other ghosts. And Abraham Lincoln comes back to the gravesite and mourns over his child. That's basically what the book is about. The beginning of the book, the action of the book, of Willie dying, is told in these fragments from like historical documents or letters. Some of them are real, like real documents, real observations, firsthand accounts of that night Willie Lincoln died. Most of them are not. Most of them are made up by George Saunders. Now, when I first started reading this, I got really stuck in the what's real, what's not. And don't do that. If you read this book, don't do that. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what's real and what's not real. Don't make that mistake. Just read it. And then the rest of it is mostly, actually no, all of it basically is dialogue. And I know that's not going to work for some people. It does make for a fast read. And it's just a moving book about a father mourning the death of his son. And it got to me. So the fourth book was Pronto by Elmer Leonard. And I read Elmer Leonard's Kill Shot last year and absolutely loved it. Pronto, definitely less in love with. And if you're familiar with the show Justified, which I've actually never watched, but Justified is based off of a character, he's in Pronto. His name is Raylan Givens. So there's, I think, 3 or 4 Raylan Givens novels. There really aren't that many. The thing that I liked about Kill Shot was the relationship between the antagonists, oddly enough. Like, there are these 2 hitmen who behaved like a married couple. I shouldn't say that. Like a bickering, angry married couple, not like a happy married couple, but you get the idea. That was missing from Pronto. Pronto, like I said, you meet Raylan Givens. He's a U.S. Marshal, and basically this guy, I mean, he's like a bookie for the mob, and the mob guy like learns that he's been skimming money, and then they want to kill him. And then he goes into witness protection, and that's when the marshal comes in. And then he's like, you know what, I'm just going to skip town, go to Italy. So Raylan follows the bookie. His name is Harry. He follows Harry to Italy. Pretty dedicated for a marshal. But the reason is Harry has given him the slip twice. It talks about previously they had a relationship where Raylan was supposed to be watching over Harry, and Harry just kind of dipped. And all the other marshals make fun of him for that. And so he gets this second chance, and they're in a diner. Harry's like, I have to go to the bathroom. And he's like, you're not going to try to leave. And he's like, no, I would never do that. And he's like, okay. And then he does. He just leaves. And I'm like, this is a guy that we made a TV show about? He's not very good at his job. Okay, moving right along. Sorry. I'm just going on tangents. Muse of Nightmares by Laini Taylor. This is the sequel to Strange the Dreamer. This is a YA fantasy, and I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty dark. I mean, Strange the Dreamer, I mean, I don't want to ruin it, but that's got some messed up stuff in it, and I'm kind of surprised that it is YA. But I don't read the YA genre or age range enough to, I guess, know what is typical. But this stuff gets pretty oof. I thought it was great. I thought it was really fantastic. What I like about it is it's fantasy, obviously, because it's another world, but there's also kind of a mix of sci-fi in there, and it's not like your swords and sorcery fantasy. I feel like maybe I'm a little burnt out on that type. That just me specifically. I mean, I go through phases, And it was refreshing. It felt like a new concept, a new world, and it's just very inventive. So I liked that about it. Also, the writing is really great. I like the flowery prose, the purple prose, and she does that very well. I feel like in this one, Muse of Nightmares a little less so than Strange with the Dreamer, but it's still there. It's still her voice. Anywho, I don't really know a whole lot to say about it just because it is a sequel, but suffice it to say, for me, it wrapped up very well. I thought the ending was very well done. And so the new characters that are introduced made sense. Like at first I was like, I wonder where this is going. But I thought all came together very nicely. And I mean, it was a good book. Good 2 books. I almost forgot one. So this one I got from the library. I don't have it with me, but it was Any Man by Amber Tamblyn. It is about a serial rapist who's a woman, and she is raping men. The storytelling itself is going to probably turn some people off. Same thing with Lincoln the Bardo. Just because, like I said, the beginning is poetry. The first part, which was my favorite part, was kind of stream of consciousness. I mean, this man is like having basically like a panic attack thinking about things that have happened to him. There's also parts where there's like an internet chat where one of the men is basically like lured by the rapist. There's a third part which is told through journal entries, which was probably my second favorite part. Anyways, what I'm getting at is told in varying styles, and you're either gonna like that or not. I liked it. It did make it quick, but I think it had important things to say. And what I liked the most, but it was hard to read, was the reactions from the media, the people on Twitter, in this book. There's all these fake tweets questioning the victims, and it gets hard. It gets hard to read because it's something that I think we see in real life. Next up, we have Summertime by J.M. Coetzee. And I think I'm saying that right because I looked it up because I wasn't sure. This one's weird. I'm going to try to explain this book. So, his name, that's him. That's the author. And just so you know, it's a work of fiction. It says so right there. But this book is about himself. So the main character's name is John Coetzee. Right? That's his name. But he's died. He's no longer with us. And there is a biographer who is interviewing people who knew John Coetzee about his life. So most of it you'll see are kind of like question and answers. Another kind of oddly formatted book. You get this painted picture, this portrait of a strange man. And when you think about the author kind of describing himself the way that he describes himself, if they're one and the same person, which if you name the character your name, people are going to draw comparisons. That makes sense, right? He doesn't paint himself well. It's very strange. He's an awkward man. He kind of stalks a woman. That's one of the perspectives, this woman who was not interested in him. These people, I don't know if they're based on real people or if they're completely fictitious, but the first one is a woman who he had an affair with. The second one is his cousin. Third one is, like I said, this woman who's not interested in him, but he pursued her anyways. And the fourth one was a colleague. All of them have very different perspectives of this man. So did I like it? Sort of. I mean, I once again, it's a very short book. I got through it quick. I would recommend it, but with some caveats. One, I wouldn't recommend this as a first book by him. The only reason I picked it up was I was looking for Disgrace, which is one of his notable works, but my library didn't have it, so I just grabbed this. Second of all, this apparently is a third in a trilogy. So there's actually a first book called Boyhood and a second one called Youth. And that's about, obviously, him as a child, him as a teenager, young man. This one, he's like in his early 30s, maybe 40s. I do want to read Boyhood and Youth. I want to know more about this strange fictional version of the author. And we'll never know how close it is to the truth, but it's very strange, but oddly interesting. So I would recommend starting with the first book. But like I said, I would probably start somewhere else with him in general. So the last book, I'm in like 60% of it. It is 2666 by Roberto Bolaño. Man, hard book to read. I don't really know where to start with it. People are probably going to avoid it for a number of reasons. One, it's long, just about 900 pages. It's broken into 5 parts. So the first 3 parts take up about a third of the book. Part 4 takes up about a third of the book. And part 5 takes up about a third of the book, roughly. And the first 3 parts, especially the first part, there's an air of innocence, but there's this growing sense of dread. The book takes place in a fictional city in Mexico called Santa Teresa, but it's based on the real city of Juarez, Mexico. And the reason there's a growing sense of dread is because that used to be the most violent city in the world. It's still up there in terms of crime. And this book particularly looks at crime against women. And so the first part, you're following these intellectuals who are looking for this writer that they love. And they think he's in Mexico. And they're so disconnected from what's happening around them. They'll be reading a newspaper and they'll kind of notice something. Oh, a woman was murdered. And they'll kind of mention it. But that's about it. The second part is about a man who lives in Santa Teresa, and he has a teenage daughter. So clearly he's worried about her because there's these murders, and he's definitely more conscious of it. So the reader's more conscious of it. And he's going mad with worry or with stress. It's not exactly clear, but you watch him descend into madness. Third part, a American reporter is down in Mexico to cover a boxing match. He learns about these murders. He wants to investigate them. And so you're getting closer to it. You're getting closer to these murders. And like I said, that's the first third of the book. You get to part 4, and it's basically just about the police discovering, or a citizen discovering the body of a murdered woman. I think there's 112 of these scenes. There are intermixed other things, but it's called part 4. It's called the part about the crime. Blew through parts 1 through 3, but part 4 is just depictions of horror, page after page after page, and it almost becomes monotonous, but it shouldn't. It shouldn't become monotonous. It should be horrifying each page. So I had to take a break. I have like 60 pages left of that part, and then I'll be on part 5. And I don't know what part 5 is really about yet, but should you read it? Maybe. I mean, it's definitely informative, and I'd like to review it maybe more once I'm done with it, but it's a disturbing book. Alrighty, that is my wrap up. I probably spent a little too much time on 2666, especially since I haven't finished it yet, but it's a monster. It's a big book, and I want to talk about it. So let me know if you've read any of these. Let me know if you're interested in any. They're kind of all downers. So, probably the least, well, Pronto wasn't a downer. That one's, but like, I was the most critical of that one. So let me know what you think, and I will see you guys next time.